Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about is, why is Hanukkah 8 days long? My friends, let's hear from the audience. Why is Hanukkah 8 days long? What do you say? Because the miracle lasted for 8 days. Okay, but as they say, that just begs the question. Why was it an 8-day long miracle, right? Maybe it would have been more impressive as a 9-day long miracle or a 13-day miracle. That would have been super cool. So why was it an 8-day miracle? What do you think? What do you have to say? Hold. Oh, very nice. So let's look on our paper, and we're going to go with the classic traditional approach to this question. Let's look in source number 1. You ready? Source number 1 is the Beit Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo, in his commentary to the Torah. And he writes like this: L'hatam shehutzruchu lahadlik shmona yamin. The reason that the candles had to light for 8 days is because Kol Yisrael hayu b'chezkat tmeim eitim. Because all of the Jewish people were tameh met. What does tameh met mean? That you're dead, that you're tameh because you were in contact with a dead body. Why were all the Jewish people considered to be tameh because of contact with a dead body? Yeah, because it's wartime, right? Stuff was happening like that. And do you know how long is it? How long is the purification process to get yourself tahor after you are tameh met?
7 days.
7 days, you are correct, right? You get sprinkled with the paraduma ashes on day 3 and 7 out of a 7-day cycle. So therefore, the Beit Yosef explains as follows. He says, they could not make pure oil until they have 7 days pass to purify themselves. Because if they're impure, your paper fell down, yeah? If they're impure and they're making oil, then they're just going to generate more impure oil. So therefore they had to wait 7 days to become purified. The Yom Echad, and there was one more day, like Tishat HaZeitim, to crush the olives and actually make oil. So therefore it would take them 8 days to produce new tahor oil. Now, but just 1 second, let's see the next, he gives 2 reasons. He says, V'haran katav, but Rabbeinu Nisim says, this is in the, what do you say, the second narrow line in the Beit Yosef. Rabbeinu Nisim says, Hayamahem shemen tahor. He says, no, that's not the explanation. Actually, they did have tahor oil. However, the tahor oil was rachok arba yamin. It was 4 days away. I don't know if you ever hear this, do you know which part of Israel traditionally has a lot of oil in it? Which Shevet's area has oil? It was Shevet Asher, that's close to the Kinneret, northern part of Israel. So it would take 4 days to pick up the tahor oil, and if it's 4 days there, then it's 4 days back. So therefore it's an 8-day trip to get new oil. So what is the Beit Yosef now telling us? That it was 8 days because it had to be 8 days. And in both of the interpretations, he's saying, I would say fundamentally the same thing, that the minimal amount of time that was needed to produce new tahor oil is 8 days. Shana, what does this teach you about how miracles work?
Through nature.
Well, what do you say? God makes what? A miracle? How long does he make a miracle last?
8 days.
No. What's the principle? For as long as what?
Needed.
As long as it's needed, absolutely. But once you can do it yourself, then Hashem is like, okay, I carried you through what was impossible, but now the part that you can do yourself, go ahead and do it.
What source number was that?
What?
What source number?
That was all source number 1, and that is the traditional answer for why Hanukkah is 8 days long, as you said, because the miracle was 8 days, and then he takes it a step back and says, why did the miracle last 8 days? These are the reasons. Nava, what do you have to say?
Well, you're saying just pure oil and they're being impure. Does it make the oil then impure?
Yeah, well, if a person is tameh met and touches food, then the tumah gets transferred to that food and the oil also, yes.
So then, if they're were unsure, so that was the reason why it had to be 8 days, and how would using the oil that they found be better if it's just going to get unsure?
What are you saying now? Listen, that's why they had to first purify themselves and then make the new pure oil, right? They couldn't use, any oil from before. If they would touch even pure oil that they would touch.
But then they used it when they were.
Oh, very good. That's why the Ron gave his other answer, because there's complications with that, absolutely. But in theory, the first explanation would say that not every single person was pure. There was like that one or two guys that was pure, and then he was the one who, put the oil in the menorah and all that. Good. Now, yes, yeah,
Wait, so the Beit Yosef's giving two explanations?
Two explanations for why it would have
Alright.
taken 8 days. Yeah, good. Now, that is, I would say, the traditional and standard civilian approach. But of course, we don't come to this class for the civilian stuff. So let us now see in source number 3 and see how this works. And we're going to try to get to the true and real reason that Hanukkah is 8 days long. Now, what we're going to look at in source number 3 is a book called the Book of Maccabees. Now, the Book of Maccabees is a book that we're going to be looking at a lot when it's time to talk about Hanukkah, because the Book of Maccabees is a book that's part of the Apocrypha. Now, what is the Apocrypha? The Apocrypha is the body of literature that is ancient literature that is not part of the Tanakh. It's not part of the Tanakh because from the Jewish perspective, it was not written with Ruach HaKodesh. So, the Book of Maccabees for Jewish people is an ancient historical work. That it has value as a work talking about history. It's not a spiritual work necessarily. It's not a Ruach HaKodesh infused work. But it's a book like a history book, like any other ancient history book. So it's a good book because it talks about all of the battles that the Jewish people had against the Greeks. I'm sure you've read about, did you ever hear about, there was the war elephants and how Elazar, was crushed by a war elephant when he tried to kill it, right, and it fell on him. And these stories about when Matityahu, when there was what do we say, like a Jewish person was willing to sacrifice a pig and then Matityahu stopped him and killed him. All of these stories, that's found in Sefer Maccabim. Let's read how Sefer Maccabim tells the story of Hanukkah as a holiday being invented. You ready? So let's start like this. This is chapter 4 of Maccabees 1. Here, this is in English. This is easy. You can really follow along now. It says, he chose blameless priests, such as had delight in the law, and they cleansed the holy place. The first thing they had to do was clean out the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, great. And what did they do? They took out all of the stones of defilement to an unclean place. In other words, they took all the tamet things from the Beit HaMikdash and they moved it out of the Beit HaMikdash. And here it says what says here 44, they took counsel, they had a discussion regarding the altar of burnt offerings. What should they do with it? They didn't know what to do with the Mizbeach. And you know why they didn't know what to do with the Mizbeach? Because this is something that was brand new. Why? Up until now, when Goyim wanted to ruin the Beit HaMikdash, what would they do? What did the Babylonians do when they wanted to ruin the Beit HaMikdash? They destroyed it. The Babylonians destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, right? What is it that the Romans did later on? They will destroy the Beit HaMikdash. What do the Greeks do over here? They don't destroy it, but they defile it. Now, the idea of having the Beit HaMikdash being defiled, and that it's for Avodah Zorah, we do find occasionally in Sefer Malachim that Jewish people do it. But here is a new kind of thing that is a new category. It's non-Jewish people defiling the Beit HaMikdash. And the question is, what's the halachic status of when a non-Jewish person defiles the Beit HaMikdash? Can those objects still be used again, or can they not be used again? So they didn't know what to do. Now you tell me, if you don't know what to do, then when in doubt, what do people say? When in doubt? Oh, you never heard, yeah? When in doubt, leave it out. That's what we say. Shana, you never heard that?
No.
No? Well, now you heard it. Good. When in doubt, you leave it out. So look what happens. They said, we are going to pull it down. We are going to take down this Mizbeach. And they put the stones in a place until a prophet should come and decide. we're going to put it in gniza. Then if a Navi tells us we could use it, we'll use it, but otherwise we're not going to use it. And look what they did in line 47. They took whole stones and they built a new altar. Because they didn't want to use that old Mizbeach, they built a new one. Hey, and now what did they do? Look in line 49. They made the holy vessels new. And they brought a candlestick, what we call a menorah, the altar of burnt offerings, and a table into the temple. In other words, what do you see from here? They made all new kelim for the Beit HaMikdash, and the menorah that they used was a new menorah that they just put together right now. And by the way, you know what question this always answers? You know what people say, wait a second, if the Beit HaMikdash was defiled, then what does it matter if you take pure oil and put it into a menorah? If the menorah is defiled, right, it doesn't help if the menorah is impure. What do you see from here? That the menorah was pure because the menorah was brand new. It was all new kelim. That's what we read here in Sefer Maccabees. This is also in the Gemara, which we'll get to in another class. Now, let's see what they did. Well, line number 50, it says, they burnt incense on the altar, they lit the lamps on the menorah, they put loaves on the table, right? They put bread on the shulchan. So basically, they get the Beit HaMikdash up and running. Good. And they rose up early in the morning of the 25th, which is the month of Kislev, and they offered a sacrifice according to the law. Now, why did they do it on the 25th? What was special about the 25th that they did it on that day? Look what it says in line 54. At the corresponding time and on the corresponding day on which the Gentiles had profaned it. They picked this day specifically because it was the day that the Greeks defiled the Beit HaMikdash. So up until then, what was the 25th of Kislev being celebrated as? What kind of a day was it?
Sad day.
Yeah, it was a sad, terrible day. But you know what they did now? They made like a tikkun for that day. So that's why they picked that day to be a happy day, so it won't be a sad day on the calendar anymore. Do you know, my friends, what is another day that we conceptually talk about that is a sad day but that will turn into a happy day? Tisha B'Av. Oh, Purim, we did it on Purim. You're right. You're right. Purim is a day in the past, right? It was supposed to be the day that they were going to get killed. Right? But Tisha B'Av, we say, right now is a sad day. But when the Beit HaMikdash is going to be built, it's going to be a day of celebration. Yeah. So that's what they did. That's their model. Yeah, Baja.
Wait, so are you saying that the whole story of Pesach happened? I mean, Hanukkah happened, and then a year later, when everything was up and running, they had the whole Hanukkah thing, the menorah thing.
When you're saying the whole story, what do you mean by the whole story? So
I'm not too sure anymore. I'm pretty sure
okay,
that
so I'll
the
tell
Greeks
you.
defiled it.
Watch,
There was
watch,
a whole
listen.
year in between, and then
Here, watch what happens. Listen. There's a big battle between the Maccabees and the Greeks, yes? This battle is a very, very prolonged battle. At a certain time, when wars were still going on, what were the Maccabees able to do? Retake Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash. The war has not yet ended, but what are they doing already in the Beit HaMikdash? Cleaning it out, yes? And then they're making the new kelim, right? The war is still going on. And then they're timing the official new opening day of the Beit HaMikdash, which is what Hanukkah means, inauguration. They time it to be the exact day that the Greeks back in the day, years back, 3 years back, they defiled it, right? That's what happened.
So when does the whole miracle of the camels lasting?
Oh, we're getting to that. I don't know. It's a good question, right? Okay, that's what we have to get to. So let us now continue. Line 54 said the corresponding time, the corresponding day which the Gentiles profaned it. It was dedicated afresh with songs. Very fantastic. Good. Hey, let's look in line 56. And they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days. And they offered burnt offerings with gladness, and they sacrificed the sacrifice. Okay, great. Line 58. There was gladness among the people. Let's do it in 59. Judah and his brethren, the whole congregation ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their seasons, year by year for 8 days, from the 25th of the month of Kislev. My friends, Bacha, what is missing in this story?
Where's the oil?
The miracle of the oil does not appear in Sefer Maccabees. And yet, what element does appear in Sefer Maccabees? The 8 days does appear there. So now, I will tell you, now we're going to understand why they made an 8-day holiday. And this is even within Sefer Maccabees. Why do they make an 8-day holiday if they don't even care to mention the 8-day miracle, which we're going to see why, but now we're going to understand. Shana.
Aren't there 2 books of Maccabees?
Yes, there's Maccabees 1, which is basically the regular story. And then there's let's call it additional material in Maccabees 2. So we're going to see some Maccabees 2 stuff too, but basically the whole story,
Also,
beginning to end is
another
Maccabees
question.
1. Yeah?
Were they allowed to delay the Hanukkah Beit HaMikdash?
Apparently so. Or, Shana, if you prefer, what is the Hanukkah of the Mikdash? Did you see that even before the Hanukkah of the Mikdash, like in line 50, what did they say? They're already doing burnt offerings, they're already doing
So it
incense.
just happened to fall on that day.
Wait. So what were they doing even before the Hanukkah of the Mikdash? They were doing korbanot and stuff. But what did they do on the 25th? What does it sound like they really saved for the 25th?
The inauguration,
The what?
the Hanukkah,
Yeah, and how do they describe? What went on during this Hanukkah?
a celebration.
Thank you! So you understand that was the big party to celebrate the Hanukkah. That was on Hanukkah. But it seems that even before, as they got things running, they started them running. Yeah. Okay? So this is the party. Thank you. One second, bud. Let's read one more thing.
Is the war over yet?
No!
Okay.
No, the war continued afterwards. The miracle, actually, the whole Beit HaMikdash took place in the middle of the war. It was more war after. I know, Maccabees were killed in battle, even after this. Okay, good, but that's just history. You ready for source number 4? Yes, you are. This is from the Torah. Now, I'll tell you what I would say. If I was a person, and I would say, you know what I really want to learn about? I want to learn about how a Hanukkah works. How does an inauguration ceremony work? So if I were to do that, and I would want to look at the earliest Hanukkah, the earliest inauguration ceremony that I would be familiar with, what do you think that earliest one is? In the Tanakh, what's the earliest dedication ceremony?
Mishkan.
The Mishkan. Okay? Let's start with the Mishkan. Because you're right, Shana, the Mishkan is basically like a mobile version of the Beit HaMikdash, right? Let us look over here in source number 4. You ready? Look what it says. Mipetach Ohel Moed lo tetzu shivat yamim. Aharon and his sons, the original Kohanim, are supposed to be in Ohel Moed in the Mishkan for how many days? 7 days. What are they doing? Number 4, during those 7 days, what are they doing in the Mishkan? They are the Yamim of Miluim. Miluim is basically their training or practice time to get ready to do the work of the Mishkan. Very good. And it says here in Pasuk Lamed Hey of Parak Chet of Vayikra, Petach Ohel Moed Tishvu Yamim V'Layla. Yomam V'Layla. Day and night, you stay in that Ohel Moed. Shivat Yamim for 7 days. Okay, that's the 7-day training period. Now let's see what happens next. And then, Vayihi Bayom Hashmini, but then Parshat Shmini begins, and on the 8th day, what happens? Then the training period is over. Aharon does all kinds of sacrifices. And do you know what happens when Aharon offers those sacrifices on the 8th day, which is the opening day of the Mishkan? What happens? What special event happens? I don't know. Has to do with fire a little bit. Okay. Then there's a fire that eats the korbanot from Shemayim. Yeah? Okay. So what do you see? That as far as the Torah is concerned, how long is the period of time for the inauguration of the Mishkan? Well, how long did it go? How long was the period of inauguration? It was 7 days of practice, and then day 8 was opening day. So altogether, the Torah describes an 8-day process for the dedication of the Mishkan. Good. Now, let's think of the next inauguration that we might find in Tanakh. What would be the next inauguration? Yeah, what do you say? What's the next inauguration? Let's start with that. What?
Shlomo.
Shlomo and the first Beit HaMikdash. Let's look over here in source number 5. This is Sefer Melachim, Melachim Aleph Perek Chet. Vayom ha'ukidesh ha'melech el toch ha'chatzer. Then the king sanctified the courtyard area. Very good. And they do all of these korbanot. Pasuk Samech Hey. Vayash Shlomo ba'et hahi et hachag. Then, what did they celebrate as the inauguration of the Beit HaMikdash? The Chag. When we have Chag written just like that, what does Chag refer to? What holiday does Chag refer to if it's just written Chag? No. Sukkot. Now, Sophia, what do you know about Sukkot? How long does Sukkot last?
7 days.
Yeah. So altogether, 7 plus 1 is 8 days. So you see that they celebrated now, Sukkot is the inauguration time of the first Beit HaMikdash. And it says, V'kol Yisrael Imo. Very nice. Ubayom HaShmini. And on the 8th day, the king blesses the people, and everybody is Samech and Tov Lev. So listen to what we have over here. The Mishkan, 8-day process. The Beit HaMikdash, number 1, 8-day process. Now I'll tell you something else. What's the next inauguration ceremony that we're supposed to be looking at? Second Beit HaMikdash.